Hi there, in this video we will explore what it means to make your class immutable. Before we start, I would like to reflect that all this time we have been using this mouse module, which is a backwards compatible lighter version of the mouse module. This also means that setting our mouse classes as immutable will have no effect. It is, however, a common practice to mark your mouse class as immutable just in case you decide to switch to using mouse in future for extended functionality. We will look at both examples of using mouse and mouse to show you what I mean by that. Alright, back to the subject of making classes immutable. Immutable by definition means unchanging over time or unable to be changed. This is exactly what applies to your class when you make it immutable. Once a class is set as immutable, you won't be able to do actions on your metaclasses, like installing attributes, methods, or similar functionality. It's important to understand setting your class as immutable only affects modifying the class through the metaclass. This does not affect functionality like changing attribute values on the underlying class. Alright, and finally, as per the documentation, one of the biggest advantages of making your classes immutable is having faster object construction and destruction, as your objects no longer will need to invoke underlying metaclass API. Let's start by looking at the backwards compatibility with mouse module. As before, we have a simple test script and we also have our human class, which is using mouse. So how can we use mouse? First of all, if we try to run this script, so let's include our library and run the test script, we're going to see that we are getting no errors. Just to prove that, we can also say warn human and let's say, let's print out the name. If we save that and rerun the script, we're going to see that we're printing out the Joe. Now, in order to use mouse, the first thing you want to do is, you want to install it. Let's type cpan followed by the module name. In our case is mouse. And this is going to take a minute or two for you to install, but I already have it installed, so you can come back to this video once it has finished for you. Now about the usage, we can go into our human class and all we really need to do is just say that we want to use mouse instead of mouse. If I save that and rerun the script, so Perl, test.pl, we're going to see that we literally made no changes to our classes and our module works as before. So we have the name attribute and we're simply printing it in the test script. Let's reflect back to using a meta class and how you access a meta class. You can tap my meta. And there are various ways how you can access it, but I'm going to use the human instance and I'm just going to call the meta method on it. And if I warn, let's say warn ref type of the meta, we're going to see that this is mouse meta class. And as before, let's try to add a method on the meta class. For example, we can say meta add methods. We're going to give it a method name, so let's call it test and fat arrow notation sub. And what we want to do here, we simply want to return a string where we can say hello from and concatenate that with current self context that we're going to shift from the global args list and say name. And let's add semicolon as well. And now I'm going to change this warn ref to warn meta and test. And I'm just also going to remove the previous warning statement. So if we save that and rerun it, and yes, of course, this is not a meta class we want to call the method on, this is actually our human class, because we just used the meta instance to add the method on our human class, so we need to use the instance of human. Right, if we rerun the script, we're going to see that we're printing out hello from Joe. Now, making your classes as mutable is actually very, very simple. All of this time we have been returning a truthy value from our class, but what we can do, we can say package, which is a global argument where we're going to have the package name, meta, and just call this method called make immutable. And if we save that, and it looks like I misspelled the package, so package, missing A over here. All right, that looks better. And what's going to happen now is basically we won't be able to modify the underlying meta class and do actions such as add method, add attribute, and so on. So if I try to rerun the script by only adding this package, so which would be human, arrow notation, accessing the meta class, and calling the make immutable, is going to complain. And it's going to complain with the add method cannot be called on immutable instance. And that's really all we need to do to make our classes faster. And when I previously mentioned that it's a common practice to add this package meta make immutable is because even though, for example, our mouse class won't be affected by making our human class immutable, it's still returning a truthy value. So if you ever wish to switch to using mouse from mouse, you're basically going to get a quick win here because you're making your classes immutable and you're returning a truthy value. Now going back to the fact where I mentioned that this is not going to affect our mouse class, now let's see what I meant by that. Now if we go back to using the mouse module, and if we save our class, rerun the script, we're going to see that we're still printing out hello from Joe. We're calling the make immutable method on the meta class. We're adding an attribute, but we're not getting any warnings. And again, as I mentioned, mouse is a lightweight version of the moose module. So there's really no need to make these classes immutable. You can still access and work with the meta class in moo or mouse. But if you do ever choose to change to using moose, know that you won't be able to access your meta class if you're calling the make immutable method. Also, as I mentioned before, most of the time this is exactly what you want, because there are such rare cases where you want to install attributes or modify your meta class in any way. You're already going to know pretty much what kind of methods and attributes you will need in the first place. I also mentioned that making your meta class immutable is not going to affect functionality such as changing your attribute values. So if we go back to using moose and rerun our script, just to make sure we're still getting the warning, and let's try to change the name. So currently this is set to read only. So let's change that to rewrite. Go to our test script. I'm going to comment out this add method because we know this is going to fail anyway. And where we are warning the test, I'm just going to print out the name, rerun the script. This should print out Joe. Yes, so it does. Before we are printing out the name, I'm going to say human name and set the name to a new value, such as new name. If we save that, rerun the script, and looks like we have syntax error. Yes, I'm missing a semicolon. Let's add that and rerun the script again. This is working as expected. So just to prove you that making your meta class immutable doesn't really affect the ability to change the attribute value. Alright, that's it for this video. We looked at what it means to set your class immutable and why would you most likely want to set your classes as immutable most of the time. We also looked at how we can switch between using mouse or moose, and we see that these two modules are really backwards compatible. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you at the next one.